Today, we explore the most horrific wedding deaths ever recorded. From a picture-perfect vintage getaway car rolling down a candlelit driveway to a glamorous reception in Georgia, where one bridesmaid's quick tumble on a grand staircase ended in the most unexpected way. It was August 3rd, 2016, in Asheville, North Carolina. The couple had rented a 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air convertible from a classic car service to transport them from the reception venue to their hotel 3 miles away. The car was powder blue with white interior and had been restored to original specifications, including the original brake system. The car had also passed a basic safety inspection 2 weeks earlier. 28-year-old Michael Brennan and 26-year-old Sarah Brennan had planned a wedding that emphasized nostalgia and classic elegance, inspired by Sarah's grandparents' 1950s wedding photos. Michael worked as an architect for a residential design firm, and Sarah was an elementary school teacher. The vintage car departure was meant to be the perfect ending to their celebration. The rental company's driver was supposed to operate the vehicle, but Michael had specifically requested to drive it himself, as he was an enthusiast of vintage cars and had experience with manual transmissions and older mechanical systems. He had owned a 1965 Mustang in college and felt confident with vintage vehicles. Michael had inspected the car earlier in the day and had driven it around the parking area to familiarize himself with the controls. The rental company representative had shown him the brake pedal operation and parking brake location, but had not mentioned any maintenance history or recent concerns about the brake system. The reception venue sat on a hillside property with a curved driveway that descended at a moderate grade from the main building to the road below. The reception had ended at 10:30, and guests had gathered outside to see the couple off. The vintage car was parked on the circular drive in front of the manor's entrance, positioned facing downhill. Guests lined both sides of the driveway, holding sparklers and throwing rose petals. When Michael and Sarah got into the car, waving to guests, Michael released the parking brake and let the car begin rolling forward down the drive. He immediately pressed the brake pedal to control the descent, but the pedal went to the floor with almost no resistance. The hydraulic brake system had developed a leak in the master cylinder earlier that day, though the fluid loss had been gradual enough that it was not visible during the pre-event inspection. The car accelerated down the slope. Michael pumped the brake pedal repeatedly and pulled the parking brake lever, but neither action slowed the vehicle. He attempted to downshift the transmission, but the manual gearbox required precise timing that he could not achieve while the car was gaining speed. Sarah screamed as they approached the sharp curve at the bottom of the driveway. Guests who had been celebrating seconds earlier now watched in horror. Michael steered into the turn, but the speed was too great. The car left the pavement and struck a large oak tree on the passenger side at approximately 40 miles per hour. The impact crushed the passenger compartment and caused massive trauma to both occupants. Neither was wearing a seatbelt, as the 1957 vehicle was not originally equipped with them. Guests who witnessed the crash ran down the driveway while others called emergency services. When they reached the car, both Michael and Sarah were unresponsive. Michael had been thrown partially through the windshield, and Sarah had suffered severe chest and head injuries from the dashboard impact. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes but found no signs of life in either victim. Both were pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner later determined that Michael had died from massive head trauma and Sarah from chest injuries that caused immediate cardiac arrest. The driveway was closed for investigation, and the vintage car rental company's maintenance records were requested by authorities. Inspectors examined the brake system to determine the cause of failure. After the investigation discovered maintenance issues, the company was held responsible and paid for the damages. What was meant to be a romantic departure turned into a fatal crash. It was May 12, 2018, in Santa Barbara, California. The estate was a private property on 8 acres of hillside overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The ceremony had taken place on the lawn at 4 o'clock, and the reception was set up under a large white tent adjacent to the main house. 51-year-old Ana Perez arrived for her niece's outdoor wedding reception. Ana worked as a bilingual customer service supervisor for a healthcare company and had flown in from Phoenix 2 days earlier to help with wedding preparations. She was close with her niece and had volunteered to coordinate with the catering staff during the event. Ana had always been the family organizer, the person everyone relied on to make events run smoothly. The catering company had erected a smaller preparation tent behind the reception area, where they operated cooking equipment, refrigeration units, and food assembly stations. The preparation tent housed 2 commercial propane burners used for keeping serving dishes warm, connected to a 100-pound propane tank positioned outside the tent wall. The catering crew had set up the system that morning, but the connection fitting between the supply line and the tank had not been properly tightened. Throughout the afternoon, propane had been leaking slowly into the space beneath the tent. The leak was small enough that it went undetected during the crew's regular safety checks. Anna had been moving between the reception tent and the preparation area since 5:30, checking on food timing and helping coordinate service. At 7:40, she entered the catering tent to inform the staff that the main course should be served. 3 catering employees were inside, working at different stations. The leaked propane had created a concentration of gas near the floor, but the odor was masked by cooking smells and the outdoor airflow. When one of the crew members ignited a handheld torch to caramelize a dessert, the flame found the gas. The explosion was instantaneous. The force blew out the tent walls and sent the canopy structure upward before it collapsed. Anna was standing approximately 8 feet from the ignition point. She was thrown backward out of the tent and landed on the stone patio. The 3 catering employees were also injured by the blast, 2 suffering severe burns and 1 struck by flying equipment. The estate's event coordinator called emergency services immediately. Multiple ambulances and fire trucks responded within 10 minutes. Anna was unconscious with extensive burns across her upper body and face, as well as blast trauma to her chest. Paramedics began treatment and transported her to a hospital, but she died en route. The medical examiner determined that she had suffered fatal lung damage from the pressure wave and thermal burns to her airway. The reception ended at once, with guests sent home. The catering owner was questioned about safety measures. After an investigation found negligence, he was taken to court and ordered to pay damages and compensation for those impacted. What began as careful catering preparation ended in a catastrophic blast. It was June 16, 2019, at a venue in Nashville, Tennessee. The venue was a popular outdoor space that sat on 7 acres of landscaped grounds along a river. The main reception area was a stone patio surrounded by gardens and a wide lawn. 30-year-old Caleb Turner arrived for his nephew's evening wedding reception. Caleb worked as a logistics coordinator for a shipping company and had taken the afternoon off to attend the celebration. He had driven 3 hours from Knoxville that morning to be there. He was close with his nephew and had helped the couple plan some of the logistics for their wedding day. The couple had hired a professional pyrotechnics company to provide a fireworks display at 9 o'clock, time to go off with the first dance. The display had cost nearly $3,000 and was meant to be the highlight of the evening. The fireworks crew had set up their launch tubes on the lawn about 150 feet from the patio, positioned to fire upward over the river. Safety barriers had been placed around the launch area, and guests had been asked to remain behind a marked line during the show. The crew consisted of 3 licensed pyrotechnicians who had performed similar displays at dozens of weddings. Caleb had been at the reception since 5:30 and was standing near the buffet table with other family members when the display began. The first 3 fireworks launched correctly, rising high into the night sky before exploding in bursts of red and gold. The 4th firework, a large shell designed to create a spreading pattern, was loaded into tube number 7. When it ignited, the tube had already shifted several degrees from vertical due to ground settling that the crew had not noticed during setup. The soft earth beneath the launch platform had compressed unevenly under the weight of the equipment. The shell launched at an angle instead of straight up. It traveled horizontally across the lawn at high speed, passing over the safety barrier and into the crowd. Caleb was holding a glass of champagne and talking to his sister when the projectile struck him directly in the chest. The impact occurred before the shell's timed explosion, but the force of the solid projectile traveling at that velocity caused massive internal trauma. He dropped to the ground immediately. Several guests nearby rushed to help him while others screamed and moved away from the launch area. The pyrotechnics crew activated their emergency shutdown and called for medical assistance. Caleb was not breathing and had no detectable pulse. CPR was started within seconds and continued for 12 minutes until paramedics arrived. They transported him to a medical center with ongoing resuscitation efforts, but he was pronounced dead 25 minutes after arrival. The medical examiner determined that the shell had caused cardiac rupture and massive hemorrhaging that would have been instantly fatal. The wedding ended immediately. The venue was evacuated and local fire marshals launched an investigation into the incident. The pyrotechnics company's license was suspended, and the launch crew was questioned about their setup and safety procedures. The venue was also shut down temporarily and later prohibited any form of fireworks display on the property. What started as a display of fireworks ended in the worst way possible. It was September 7, 2017, at a ballroom in Charleston, South Carolina. The ballroom used for the event was a renovated historic building in downtown Charleston that featured exposed brick walls, hardwood floors, and a vaulted ceiling with heavy wooden beams. The venue was popular for its elegant atmosphere. 29-year-old Rachel Kim arrived for her best friend's wedding reception. Rachel worked as a pediatric nurse and had arranged her shift schedule weeks in advance to ensure she could serve as maid of honor. She had known the bride since they were 7 years old, having grown up in the same neighborhood. The two had been inseparable through school and college. For this wedding, the event company had installed a custom lighting system that included 8 moving spotlights, colored wash lights, and decorative string lighting suspended from a metal grid attached to the ceiling beams. The lighting package had been specifically requested by the bride to create a nightclub atmosphere. The lighting grid was a large steel frame, about 16 feet long and 12 feet wide. It was hanging from the ceiling using 4 cables. One of the cables was attached with a mounting bracket that was not strong enough to hold the full weight of the grid and the equipment on it. The lighting setup weighed almost 100 pounds more than what the bracket could safely support. Rachel had spent most of the evening fulfilling her duties as maid of honor, helping with the bride's dress, coordinating with vendors, and giving a toast during dinner. By 9:15, the formal events had concluded and the dance floor had opened. She was dancing with a group of bridesmaids in the center of the floor when the failure occurred. During a song with heavy bass, the vibrations from the sound system combined with the movement of dancers below caused the overloaded bracket to separate from the beam. The cable detached, and the grid immediately tilted. Within 2 seconds, a second cable pulled free, and the entire structure began to fall. Rachel was directly beneath the grid when it came down. The metal structure, along with the attached lighting equipment, weighed approximately 400 pounds and hit her from above, driving her to the floor and causing catastrophic head and spinal injuries. The impact was so severe that she was knocked unconscious instantly. The music stopped immediately. The venue manager called emergency services and directed several men to carefully raise the structure. Rachel was unconscious, not breathing, and bleeding severely from head trauma. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes and began advanced life support, but there was no response. She was transported to a medical center where trauma physicians continued efforts for 18 minutes before declaring her dead. The cause of death was determined to be massive skull fracture and brain injury incompatible with life. The wedding was immediately canceled after the bride collapsed upon hearing the news. The ballroom was closed and city building inspectors arrived to examine the structural failure. The venue faced multiple investigations into its permitting and contractor oversight procedures. After the findings, the venue paid heavily in compensation to the affected family and was temporarily shut down by city authorities. What was meant to be an elegant lighting setup turned into a deadly trap. It was October 14, 2017, at a hotel in Portland, Oregon, when 72-year-old Dorothy Callahan attended her grandson's wedding reception. Dorothy had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 40 years earlier and managed her condition with insulin injections and careful monitoring of her blood sugar levels. She worked part-time as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm and lived independently in a condo 15 minutes from the hotel. Her diabetes management had been excellent for years, with few complications. The wedding had begun with a ceremony at 2 o'clock, followed by a cocktail hour and seated dinner. Dorothy had eaten a light breakfast that morning and had taken her regular insulin dose at 8 o'clock, as she always did. She brought her glucose monitor and emergency supplies in her purse, but placed the purse under her chair during the reception and did not check her levels throughout the event. She was having too much fun to think about her routine. The reception was lively, with music, dancing, and multiple courses of food served over 3 hours. Dorothy was excited to celebrate with her grandson and became caught up in conversations with relatives she had not seen in years. She danced twice, gave a toast during dinner, and drank 2 glasses of champagne. The combination of physical activity, alcohol, and irregular eating disrupted her normal routine. She ate less than usual because she was talking so much. By 7 o'clock, Dorothy began feeling slightly lightheaded, but attributed it to the excitement and noise of the celebration. She did not recognize the early symptoms of dropping blood sugar because her attention was focused on the festivities. She ate a piece of wedding cake, but did not consume enough carbohydrates to counteract the insulin still active in her system. The champagne had also affected her body's ability to regulate glucose. The reception concluded at 8:30. Dorothy said goodbye to family members, retrieved her purse, and walked to her car in the hotel parking garage. She drove home, a trip that normally took 12 minutes. When she arrived at her condo building, she parked in her assigned space and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. She was feeling increasingly tired but thought she just needed rest. She entered her apartment at 9:05 and sat down on the sofa, intending to rest before preparing for bed. Her blood sugar had continued to drop throughout the drive home. Within minutes, she experienced confusion, rapid heartbeat, and severe weakness. She tried to reach for her phone on the coffee table but lost consciousness before making the call. Dorothy lived alone, and no one knew she was in distress. Her body's glucose level continued to fall during the night, reaching dangerously low levels that caused brain function to deteriorate. By morning, she had been in severe hypoglycemic shock for over 8 hours. Her brain was being starved of the glucose it needed to function. A co-worker who was supposed to meet Dorothy for Sunday brunch called her cell phone repeatedly starting at 11 o'clock, but received no answer. Concerned, the co-worker drove to Dorothy's condo and asked the building manager to check on her. They entered the apartment at 1:15 and found Dorothy unconscious on the sofa. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics arrived and found her unresponsive with no detectable blood sugar reading on their monitor. They administered emergency glucose and began transport to the hospital, but Dorothy never regained consciousness. She was pronounced dead at 2:40 that afternoon. The cause of death was determined to be severe hypoglycemia, leading to cardiac arrest and brain death. What seemed like a joyful celebration disrupted a careful medical routine with deadly consequences. It was April 21st, 2018, in Savannah, Georgia, when 24-year-old Jessica Morris attended her college roommate's wedding reception. Jessica worked as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup and had flown in from Austin 2 days earlier for the wedding weekend. She had been close with the bride since their freshman year and was excited to celebrate with their entire friend group. The wedding reception was held in the estate's main ballroom, a 2-story space with a grand staircase connecting the upper gallery to the main floor. Jessica had arrived at 5 o'clock, wearing a burgundy cocktail dress and 4-inch stiletto heels that she had bought online specifically for the occasion. She wore heels occasionally for work events, but was not used to walking in shoes this high. The shoes looked perfect with her dress, but pinched her toes. The reception included dinner, speeches, and dancing. Jessica spent most of the evening on the dance floor with friends, taking frequent trips to the open bar between songs. By 9:30, she had consumed 4 glasses of wine and 2 cocktails over the course of the evening. She felt buzzed and happy, laughing loudly with her friends. When someone suggested taking group photos in the upper gallery, Jessica joined them enthusiastically. They retrieved props from a photo booth station that had been set up near the coat check. To return to the main floor, Jessica chose to use the grand staircase rather than wait for the elevator with the rest of her group. The stairs were carpeted and well lit, with a polished wooden handrail on both sides. There were 18 steps in total, divided into 2 sections with a landing in between. Jessica descended the first section without difficulty, holding the handrail with her right hand. When she reached the landing and turned to continue down the second section, she misjudged the position of the first step. Her left heel caught the edge of the stair, and she pitched forward. The combination of the high heels and alcohol had affected her balance and coordination. She tried to catch herself with the handrail but could not grip it in time. She fell head-first down the remaining steps, tumbling 4 times before landing at the bottom. Several guests witnessed the fall and rushed to help her. Jessica was conscious and sitting up, insisting she was fine despite visible scrapes on her hands and a small cut above her eyebrow. She laughed nervously and made a joke about the open bar. The estate's event coordinator offered to call an ambulance, but Jessica refused, embarrassed by the attention and not wanting to ruin the party. Her friends helped her to a chair. Jessica had no obvious broken bones. Her speech was clear, and she was able to move all her limbs. She was advised to go to the hospital for evaluation, but Jessica declined, saying she just wanted to get back to her hotel and sleep it off. 2 friends drove her to her hotel room, where she cleaned her scrapes, applied bandages, and took 3 ibuprofen for the headache that had developed. She changed into pajamas and got into bed at 11:30. During the night, Jessica's condition deteriorated. She had suffered a subdural hematoma from striking her head during the fall. Blood slowly accumulated in the space between her brain and skull, creating pressure that gradually affected her brain function. She was alone in the hotel room with no one to notice her declining state. At 10 o'clock the next morning, hotel housekeeping knocked on her door for late checkout, but received no answer. After repeated knocking, they used a master key to enter and found Jessica unresponsive in bed. They called emergency services immediately. Paramedics arrived and found Jessica with fixed and dilated pupils, shallow breathing, and no response to stimuli. They transported her to the hospital, but she was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The medical examiner determined that the subdural hematoma had caused fatal brain swelling. Her friends were notified within hours. The estate reviewed their safety protocols regarding alcohol service and staircase access. Changes were later implemented to prevent similar incidents in the future. What appeared to be a minor stumble led to a silent death hours later. Thanks for watching. Enjoy this video? Click more.